Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Austin from Awful Media, and today we'll be setting up our item database for our new inventory system. What that'll consist of is loading in some JSON data, creating an item from that, and then using that to populate our slots with items. Pretty cool stuff. But first of all, what I want to do is just go ahead and finish up what we started here. I want to take the slot and the item and make a prefab of that. So I'll create a prefabs folder real quick in the assets folder, create a prefab folder. Then I'll drag the slot into that. Now, I'm pretty sure we're going to have these separated anyway. So what I want to do is I don't want that to be in there with this inside the slot. I don't want it to be the child of the slot. So I'll drag the item separately, delete the item that is part of the slot itself, and then just delete that from that, drag that down there, and then we can delete that. And now we have our slot, what I can rename slot, and our item. Now slot will represent the actual container and item will represent the actual item. Now what I'll do is I'll delete everything, including that slot, and when we populate it, what we'll do is we'll add a slot, and then let's say there's an item in that slot, we'll add the item to that slot. And that's going to work just like that. Alright, so that's out of the way. Let's go ahead and create a scripts folder. Now the fun stuff begins. The stuff I actually enjoy doing. So create scripts. I'm going to create a C# script. Call this item database. Just a quick note, this may not be for very new beginners. You know, if you just started out with programming or Unity, you might want to look at some earlier tutorials. This will not explain everything when it comes to programming in detail. Oh, I haven't loaded in my tools for Visual Studio yet. Import that. Alright, so I have my item database class here. That's looking like I want it. Let's get rid of this crap. Don't need that. Now, one thing I know I'll need a library to handle the JSON data. And we've done this in the past. But just to show you really quick, I would go here and grab the LitJson framework, lvv.github.io/litjson. Go download the DLL. And then you're going to go to Unity. You're going to drop in the library. So let me find that real quick. Go to Downloads. We go to the library. I'm going to drag that in. I'm going to drop this into a plugins folder. Did I put it somewhere? I put it in scripts. Drop that into plugins. Now go back to Visual Studio. And we're going to be using LitJson. If you don't have that available, go to your references, click Add Reference, go to Browse. You can go to Browse, Browse. And you're going to find your download folder here. Go to your downloads, find the library you just downloaded. Well, come on. And select it there, and then click OK. And you'll be able to use it just like that within Visual Studio. All right, so we've done this before. We've used this a couple of times, but I'm going to go over it real quick again. What this does is it allows us to take JSON data, convert it to a C# object, or take a C# object and create a JSON object from that. All right, so one thing we'll need is an item class. Let's create a public class item. This will hold all of the properties for our actual item. I don't know why I did that. Like our title, our ID, our stats, stuff like that. We can define that, create an instance of this object, and then create items from that, just like we did before in the last series. So now I'll need to make a list of all the items in the game. To do that, we'll need a generic list. I'm using, let's see, system.collections.generic. Give us access to the actual list. So I'm gonna do we're gonna do private list. It's gonna be of item type. It's gonna be equal to, let's call it actually a database. It's equal to new list item. Mess up my syntax a little bit there. So it's going to store all the items that we're going to drag in from the JSON data. It's going to store all those items within that database. And now I'll need an actual JSON data object. Now this is just going to hold the actual JSON data that we pull in from the string. I'm going to call it item data. Let's make this private. Okay. So we have that. Now all I have to do is drag in the actual data itself. So on start, what I want to do is I want to load in the data. So do item data is equal to JSON mapper. Again, it's a part of the LitJson library. What this does is it allows you to take an object and convert it to, say, a JSON object, like a C# object to a JSON object, or the other way around. So I want to go from JSON to a C# object. So I'm going to go to object. Then I have to pass it the actual data. And ours is going to be read from the file system. So what we'll do is we'll go up here and go using system.io. This gives us access to the file system so we can load in files. We know our JSON file will be in the assets folder. It's not yet, but it will be. It'll be called items.json, and we'll need to read in all of that data at one time. So what I'll do is I'll go file. That gives us access to files you see there. Dot read all lines, read all text, sorry. And what we want to do is read all the text from the certain file that we're going to be placing in our assets folder. And I know it's going to be within the assets folder. It's going to be a data path that gives us the path to the assets folder no matter what the build platform is. And then I will concatenate the actual name of the folder it's in and the name of the file. So ours is going to be placed, this is going to be called items.json, but if we do that and we don't place it within a certain folder by a certain name, what it's going to do is it will build that into the actual source for the game. It'll build the actual file. If we want to leave it separate from the game where we can actually edit it without recompiling the game, then we have to add it to a folder called streaming assets. Now these files do not get built into the game, but you can still reference them no problem. So streaming assets, I'm going to drop it in there and go into Unity here. I'm going to go ahead and create that folder. Create folder, call this streaming assets. And within streaming assets, we will have our JSON data. Let's go ahead and create that just real quick here. I'm going to go to, I believe it's on my desktop. It's called Awesome Inventory System. I'm going to go to that, go to Assets, notice Streaming Assets, and inside this I'm going to create a new file, just a text document. I want to call this items.json. Yes, I want to save the file extension. And now we have a JSON file. And that should be right there, and it is. Let's open this up. Let's fill out an item real quick. So if you're not familiar with JSON, I highly suggest you look it up somewhere else because I'm not going to be going into great detail about it, but I will explain it kind of briefly. So what I have, first of all, is going to be an object. It's going to contain a couple of different items. Each item itself is going to be an item within an object. So that's how we're going to structure this. We're going to do that, and then have another item just like that. And it's going to keep going down. And each item will have attributes that we can define, a key and value pair. So the ID will be 1. So ID is equal to 0 for the first item. The next one will be title or name, whatever you want to call it. I call mine title so I can keep it the same across the code and not interfere with like GameObject.name, stuff like that. So title of this will be steel gloves. All right, and the next one will be value. These are worth 6 value, whatever that would be. And we can say that's our first item. The next item would be the same thing. So we come up here and we can, if we come over here, we can take all this, copy it and bring it down here and say 1, item ID of 1. Call this the great stick. And this is worth 543 value. And now we have an item database. But how do we use this? Obviously we'll add more stuff into that later on, but I want to get it set up and going real quick. So we have an item database. It's in this folder. It's called items.json. So that should be bringing it in unless we have an error somewhere, which we probably do. But worry about that when we get there. And we have to take the data that we get from that and build out an item from it. So take the title and add it to the item. Take the description and add it to the item, stuff like that. So to do that, let's set up a few properties for our item. The first one being a public int ID. And this is going to be an automatic getter setter. And what that's going to do is that allows us to, like, you can obviously, if you don't want this to be able to change from outside this class, you can set the set to be private, and that way you can't screw up the database unless you're working inside the database itself. But for now, we'll just keep it a generic get set property. And it's going to be an auto implementer, so it's going to implement itself in the private property and the public property itself, or the private field with a public property. It's a different take on the last system we did, but it's a much better approach to it. If you're not familiar with properties in C#, I highly suggest you look them up. Unity themselves have a nice tutorial on that. It'll be very helpful, and it'll make your code much more manageable. Next will be a public string, and we have, what was the next thing? A title. Another get set. Notice these properties start with a capital letter. The private field that goes along with that will be your standard private int ID, just like that. But properties go with a capital letter. So we had title, and then we had, what was the next one? Value. So public int value get set. And now we have to create a constructor for these three values. We'll add more again, but just for now, public item. This is basic object-oriented programming in C#, but I want to explain it real quick. You have an item class. You can create an instance of this class by going item is equal to new item. Okay, so it makes a new item just like that. Well, not with 0 in it. That makes a new item. So now this is an instance of this class. It's a copy of that class. And when you call a constructor, what you can do is you can define values to that class from your new class. So then I could do item.id is equal to something, right? You can do that for each one, or you can make it a constructor where you just define it within here. So ID is equal to 6, title is equal to blah, 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 and so on. It makes it really easy to set up your items. And without that, we could not do this. There's no way. So the constructor will take an integer argument, which would be an ID. It'll take a string, title, and an int value. Keeping it simple for now. But then what I'll do is I'll set this.id, which is saying this instance of this class ID, the property ID. Notice it's not the item ID. That would just be is equal to ID. That will be that ID. So the ID that we're passing it is setting that value to be this.id. So this.id is now equal to the value we passed it. So the reference to this class, the instance of this class, is now equal to what we passed the object constructor. This.title is equal to title. This.value is equal to value. So now we have a basic constructor. Notice now there's an error up here. It's saying, hey, you're trying to make an instance of this class, and there's no, you're not passing any parameters, but there's only one constructor and it has 3 parameters, so something's wrong somewhere. So fix it. So I can say like 0. So my ID is 0, the title is ball, and the value is 5. Now that gets rid of the actual error, and that creates an instance of item at ID 0 with a title ball and a value of 5. We now have an item. And what we would do is we take our database and add that to it, and like database dot add and add item. And now our database now has an item in it, so then I could do database 0 dot item or dot ID. We'll do title. And what I'll do is I'll print this. So do debug dot log. And what that'll do is that will print out database 0 title, which will be the first item, which will be a ball. And that's how that would work. But we don't need any of that stuff right now. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and set up the system to load in the data from the JSON file. Let's create a method for that. I'll call this, it's a void, it's private, doesn't return anything. Let's call it construct item database. Doesn't take a parameter, it just straight up does what I tell it to do. And for this, what we'll have to do is we'll have to go through each value that we got from item data. Now this is going to be a dictionary. What it's going to do is it's going to contain each key and value pair that it pulls from right here. So it's going to contain, the first item will have an ID that has a value, a title that has a value, that's confusing, that has a value. And then the second item will be item 1 in the field or in the index. It'll be the same thing over and over and over. We can compare the IDs, make sure that we didn't get them mixed up, and then the index is not compared to the ID. That's when we have an ID separate from the index, so we can mess up the database and it not ruin absolutely everything. So now let's go ahead and loop through each item or each element in our item data. So it would be int I is equal to 0, I is less than item data dot count, and I plus plus. Now just a straight up for loop. What we're doing is we're taking the list that we created from JSON data. We're counting, or the dictionary, counting each item in it and looping through for each item in it. So it's going to say I is equal to 0, blah, 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 I plus plus for each one. I'm not going to explain everything, but I'm trying to cover the things that you may not understand completely. All right, now, so for this, what we have to do is we have to add the item that we just looped over to our item database. To do that, I'll do database.add. And this takes an item. It's an item type list, as you can see here. List is item. And we have an item class that we can create an item from a constructor with. Great. So do new item. And to grab the actual item that we're on top of right now, the one we're looping over right this minute, I'll do item data I. Notice that the index goes up each time it loops around, and ours is set up to go 0, 1, 2, and so on. So we'll do that, and then we'll do the first one being ID. And that'll give us a type error, I'm sure, saying, hey, this is a JSON data and it needed an integer, so how do I fix that? I'll fix that in a second. Just give you an example. Do item data I, and then do, it's a string, so it'll be, or it's the title, so it'll be title. And then do item data I again, and then I need the actual, value that time. Now, I'm getting type errors like expected. And that's because this is a JSON data and it needs an integer. I can just typecast that no problem as an int. And this one, it needs a string and it's giving it a JSON data once again. So I'm going to do toString, type that as a string, no problem. And this is also an int, so go ahead and cast that just like that. Now that should be working for our few values. Now in the start method, what I want to do is I want to construct the item database just like that. And I want to print out something just to make sure it's working, because it probably isn't. You know how it goes with me. So do that, then I want to do database one dot title. Now that should give me the great stick. It should give me the great stick. No guarantees, but it should give me the great stick. Alright, so I have to put the item database onto an object that's in the game. So I'm going to create an empty object. I'm going to call it inventory and go ahead and drag that on there. And I'm going to click play and cross my fingers. And would you look at that, the great stick. Alright, so it is constructing from the JSON data file. That's great. Let's go ahead and flesh this out a bit more and add some more values to it. So I want, let's see, we have value. I got to think of these things that I need. Let's create an object for stats. And what this will be is it'll be an array that contains, let's say, power be 1, and then defense would be 4, and vitality would be 2. And then we would add, description, of course. This will describe the item, so I'll say gloves made from steel. Yeah. All right. And we need to see if are these stackable? Can these be stacked? Let's see, stackable. These are not stackable. So false. What is the rarity? Let's see, rarity. This one's a rarity on a scale of 1 to 10. This would be like a 2 maybe. It's up to you how you do this, right? And then I want to have a slug. Now this is going to be something code friendly that we can call it. This will have no spaces, no symbols, nothing like that, no punctuation. It'll just be a slug that has letters and underscores. So I'll call this still gloves. And there we have, so far I think, we probably need some more, but I'll do that. The great stick. Oh, missing a comma there. This value is 543, gives you 56 power and 2 defense and 54 vitality. It's a stick. So it's a stick that's pretty great. Cool. Let's make it stackable just because. The rarity is 6, and it's called the Great Stick. Alright. We have 2 items made. Everything should still be working the same, but I want to add these values to the actual class. It's the item class. So we have value, then we have stats. What I would do, I think, we could set this up to be an array here as well, and then loop through the array that we passed it and grab the information that way. Or we could just set it up to be like, to have like power and then defense and so on, which I think we'll do that. So a public power set, then the public int, so what was the other one? Defense, get set. Then a pubic. Nope. Public int. So power defense vitality. Get set. And we have the description, so public string description. And then we had, what was it, stackable? So public, the bool will be stackable. Get set. And what was it? So we had stackable rarity and slug. So public rarity int, rarity, get set. And then public string slug, get set. Well, that took forever. So the problem with this now is we have to add each of these to the constructor. If we have just one constructor, which we probably will, we can have overloads. But I don't know what the benefit right now would be, because each thing will probably have a stat defined. But then again, who knows? We might just make other ones. Actually, it wouldn't be a bad idea, because we'll need this in the future, to go ahead and create an empty constructor. So do a public item. And what that means is this, we can create an item later on that will just kind of empty out the item. So we can say, like if we delete an item from an inventory slot, we can set that slot to be equal to a new item that will contain no information. And what we could do with that is say like maybe this ID is equal to -1, a value that we'll never get in the index because it starts at 0 and goes up. So we know that if we get a -1 item, there's something wrong there, or that it nulled out in some way and there was an error, or we just deleted it on purpose, something like that. So we have that information, so we can say new item, like right here I could say item is equal to a new item. And what that'll be is that'll be an item that's now valid, but the item will just be -1 ID. So we know if we get that item, oh, that's not a real item, get rid of it, or it's broken or something. So it's good. It's a good way to manage that, I think. Not a bad idea. Now let's go ahead and add all this stuff to this constructor. I may fast forward here a bit so you don't have to watch every little thing. And here we go. Int power, int defense, int vitality, string description, bool stackable, int rarity, and string slug. Alright, now with that, it's going to throw an error up here saying, hey, you have a lot more things than you have in this thing. It's looking for a lot more parameters than you're actually passing it. And we'll fix that here in a second. But now I need to do this dot power is power is equal to power. This dot vitality is equal to vitality. This dot description is equal to description. This dot stackable is equal to stackable. This dot rarity is equal to rarity. This dot slug is equal to slug. Okay, now we have that fleshed out, looking good. But we have to update our method for adding items to it. And just an example, what I could do is I could do this, copy this, and say, sometimes we only just need these values, so let's delete all of these parameters. We don't need those. And then get rid of all the ones we just removed. And now technically that is a valid that's a valid call to the new item, because we're calling this constructor and not this constructor. So that would work just fine. But I don't think we'll ever just need ID, title, and value. We may, who knows, but I don't think I will for now. So I'm gonna get rid of that and come up here and fix some of the issues that we're having. So enter that down, add a comma, and let's go ahead and add, so we got value, then we have power. So it's going to be an int. Then we need defense, so it's going to be the same thing. Let's just copy all this. It's going to be defense. Then we need vitality, it's going to be the same thing, vitality. And then we need description, which will be just a string, so we'll do description .toString. The next thing we need is stackable, which will be a bool. Now this is going to be cool because what we have to do is we have to convert this string to a bool. And to do that, I can go through bool.parse, pass it a string, or I can do the same thing with casting it as a bool. So item data, stackable, just like that. And now it's another integer, so paste that in. Call this, not value, what was it? Rarity. And now it needs a string, so to be item data, and it's called slug.toString. And there we have our mess of a database. No, it ain't too bad. It wouldn't be too bad to manage this, really. It's pretty clear what's going on. So what this should do is it should allow us now to say, I want the first items, I want to know what its slug is. Cool. Let's go back into Unity here. Click play. View all of the errors, I'm sure. The given key was not present in the dictionary. That's great because it's not going to tell which key it is it? I think I just mistyped one of the values, but it's not going to tell me which key it is. Oh, okay. So power, defense, and vitality. This is all done wrong, I'm sure, because these are actually in an array. So I'd have to go into, what's it called, stats? I'm not sure if this is the problem it's telling me. I'm sure it is, actually. Have to go into stats and grab that. Is that how I did that? Stats and then, yeah. Now that might work. Yeah. So now I have the slug for the great stick. And just to verify, that is what I'm looking for. Oop, it was right there. The great stick. It is the second item that's correct. And that's the slug. Let's grab the power for the great stick. And it should be like 50 something, I think. Yeah, 56. There we go. So we have an item database set up. We can drag in items, can pull items in from an external file. It's great. But we know we'll need one thing for this. We'll need a way to fetch an item from the database without going through all this, looping through each item and stuff. So what I'll do is I'll create a public. And this will return an item. And I will call this fetch item by ID. And this will return an item. Oops, sorry. New item. I love errors that tell me what's wrong. It's so helpful. Read your errors, people. They will help you. All right. I need to pass it an ID so we know what we're looking for. Now I have to loop through each item in the database. No problem. So what I can do is do a for, or we could do a for each, but I'm a sucker for fors. Is equal to 0. I is less than database.count I++. So we'll return, if we find it, we'll return an item. If we don't, for now we'll return null. We can pass it an error if we want to, but for now we'll do null. It will return that item that it found if the ID matches the ID of the item we passed it. So we're looping through, we're going through each item in the database. We have access to the ID for that data, for that item in that database. So we can see if the ID matches the ID that we passed it. Say we're looking for ID number 72. Well, we're on 71, the next one is 72. When we find it, we're like, oh, there's the one we need. So let's stop right there. Let's pull that item out. Let's send it back to where it was called from, and then let's stop looking. We found it, we're done. So to do that, we'll do if database i.id is equal to ID. Now this is the ID for the item that we're looped over right now. We're going over it right now. And this is the ID for the value, or for the item that we passed to the method. So if it matches, I want to return a new item that contains, let's see, it'll be database, not new database, it's database I. Now database I is an item. As you can see here, item. It contains a list of items. So I can return database I. That's the same as returning a new item with that database information inside of it. So if we do find it, it will return, which will break from that loop and continue on its way. And if we don't, it will go down here and return null, which will give us an error, which we could define later. We could make up our own error that says, hey, there was an issue finding the item. But for now, we'll know what it means if it returns a null item. So to check that it's working, we'll use this debug here. And I'll do fetch item by ID. I'll pass it ID of 0. And that will return an item. Then I could do dot, let's see, dot description. And now this should print out the description for the first item in the database. Gloves made from steel, yay. Okay, it does, cool. So everything in our database is working. And we are good to go on the next thing. So we have a way to query items in our database. We have a way to load in items to our database, and we have a way to define items. So everything is going well so far. In the next part, we'll do whatever comes next. I'm not really sure what the next thing would be. It will probably be defining I will actually populate the inventory with slots and figure out if we need to add items to it. So we're working on the actual inventory class. That's the fun one, guys. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Keep in mind, this was supported by using my Patreon campaign. Check it out in the description below. If you like the series, it will mean a lot if you can help me out on the campaign. If not, just drop a like, leave me a comment, and share the video, guys. It helps a lot. Thank you for watching. My name is Austin, and I will see you next time.